All right, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to be doing a temporal trigger. And so basically this is a trigger that we're going to fire off. It's going to basically cause an explosion to happen if someone tries to do any DML on a on one particular table. Now to get to understand this, right now I've got some basic SQL here. I'm dropping a table. If it's not there, not a big deal. It'll just error out. I'm creating a basic table with one field or one column. And then I'm inserting the values 1, 2, and 3 in that column. And then I'm adding a primary key. So when I run this thing, it's again, if the table doesn't exist, it looks like an error that gets created. Then there's a bunch of inserts there, and then finally the primary key is created. That will also, by the way, commit the changes. So now after I run it, when I do a quick little refresh here, we'll see there's my table. And let's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and do a nice little select from the table. So we go select asterisk from basic table and basic table. And then I'm going to go run, and there's all my fabulous data there. And if I was to go, basically, let's actually take one of those inserts and run it again. So let's try and insert number 1 again into that table. It blows up, and it blows up with a unique constraint, which is awesome. But it also blows up with an error 0001. In fact, actually, it's negative 0001. And this is an ORA error because I'm on an Oracle database. All right, so what I want you to kind of get out of that deal is that this is the error code and this is the error message. All right, what if I told you you could, in fact, create your own explosions? And basically the way to do that is we're going to have to go and do a little bit of programming. And my goal here isn't to teach everything there is to know about the language this is based on, which is Pl Sql. My goal here is just to teach you enough to get this trigger going. All right, so Pl Sql. So first of all, the basics of a Pl Sql program or block is a begin, a null, and an end, and a slash. All right, so right there, that is the beginnings of basically a block. And if I ran that block, I get the feedback that it's successfully completed. The block starts with a begin, ends at an end, and I've got one line there that basically says, don't do anything. That's basically what that line says, don't do anything. Now, I would like it to explode. So there is a procedure, procedure that comes with the Oracle database called raise application error, and you pass in two things. You pass in a code and you pass in a message. All right, so you pass in a code, you pass in a message. Now what happens? Watch what happens when I run it. So we get right there. I know it looks like something bad happened and something bad did happen. It blew up on line 2. That's kind of line 2. Let me get rid of this stuff too. That's knocking off my lines. There's line 2. And the raise application error basically caused the explosion. And then the rest of this is just basically collateral damage from the explosion. But that basically caused a nice little explosion. All right, so now let's get a little bit closer to having it explode on a particular thing. I'm going to go declare. I'm going to declare starts a declaration section, or basically where the variables live. You have to declare your variables before you use them. And so I'm going to declare a variable here. I'm going to basically declare a variable which I'm going to call I don't know, block time. And right now I'm just going to have that equal to 12, right? Just basically block time equal to 12. Of course, that's not the way this language works. It's assigned 12. And the other thing I forgot to do here is I forgot to say that this is actually a number. It's a number with 2 decimals and no integers. Let's try it again. Two numbers of which none are decimal is what I meant to say. It's the end of the day for me here, but that's okay. That's fine. Okay, so we get that block time. That's not really going to say, we're not going to see anything different, but there you go. Now, if I was to put a control structure here, if I was to say if the block time is equal to 12, then do that command and if. Right, so the if and end, actually the if, the then, and the end if are all part of basically how you do what's called a control structure in programming, but basically it's an if statement. When I run this again, it's still going to blow up, but now watch what happens when I change this thing to 11, we'll say. So block time is going to be 11. If I run this thing, it's going to have no problem and successfully complete. All right, so digest that for a second. All right, so now let's actually make line 2 a block time. So to do this, by the way, I'm going to say, like right now, it's about 8 o'clock Central Time for me. So what time is it on the database? If I go select current or sysdate from dual, don't worry too much about the language, what's going on here, but all I'm asking for is what's the date today? That's the date today. Now that date, sadly, is not going to tell me the time. It's aware of the time, but it's not going to tell me the time. So if I go to char, all this is super Oracle specific, by the way, to char, and I'm going to pass in a mask of 24-hour time. And actually, that's all I really need. Yeah, that's it, just 24-hour time. And then I run this. I can see that it's apparently 2 in the morning, wherever my database actually is. It's 2 in the morning. All right, so if I change this guy back to 2, I wouldn't need that 0 in front, but whatever, and run it again, it's going to have no problem because, oh, sorry, that was a good point. But just change that to 2. This guy's still looking for 12. If I basically change that to 2, now we're back to having it explode. All right, good deal. So now what I want to do is instead of saying 2, I'm going to basically take this, which is stripping off the time. I'm going to put that there. Now, this is a number. I want this to be a number. So I'm going to put that character string into a number. So if you haven't programmed before, this might look a little bizarre. If you have programmed before, this might look pretty trivial. But what's happening here is this date is getting converted to a character string with this format of a 24-hour hour. And then that returns a string, and then out pops a to number, and it converts it to a number. I'm just basically making the comparison later on down here. When I'm comparing block time to a number, I want it to be relatively smooth. So I'm going to go. And it blew up, which is awesome. If I basically change the condition now for like blow up at 1 o'clock, it's going to have no problem. It's going to successfully complete. All right, so we don't really need that anymore. We can get rid of that. All right, so let's make this a little bit more dynamic. What we want now is instead of having hard-coded numbers in here and hard-coded strings, we're going to make them into a bunch of variables. So what I'm going to basically say is that the earliest hour, I guess, is going to be a number 2, 0, which is going to be assigned let's just go 0, 2, because we know that's what it is right now. And then the latest hour, the number 2, 0, and it's going to be assigned. And I'm just going to cheap out here, and I'm basically going to say it's the earliest hour plus 1. All right. So basically, I want it to block some between 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning server time. So latest hour, what's going on? I'm missing a semicolon there. All right, so let's go. And this thing worked without a problem because I'm not even using it. That's great. All right, let's go down here. Spent all this time getting the information up here, but I got to use it. So I'm going to say where this is between the earliest hour and the lastest. Oh boy. Latest hour. So if you're between the earliest and the latest, please blow up. And it blew up, which is awesome. Good deal. If I decided that this really should be 00, which is about 2 hours ago, it's got no problem. All right. Always keep testing as you go to make sure this is working the way you think it should. Okay, so this is my code. This is my message. I don't want them just sitting out here in the executable section. I want to have variables for that. So I'm going to go the error code is a number. It looks like you can have 5 digits, of which 0 are decimal. I'm going to assign that negative 2000, semicolon. I'm going to have an error message. It's going to be a variable length character string. I'm just going to go big with 30 for now. And it's going to be assigned, you wound me. Copy and paste, semicolon. And now in here, I'm going to change that to be the error code. I'm going to change this to be the error message. And now what I've got is a reasonably decent program now. Near enough, anyway. All right, so our next step is to actually bring in some exception handling for this. So we have our declaration section, which is where the variables are created and potentially assigned. We have our executable section, but there is actually one more section that we should be doing, and we should have a exception section. So to show you what that looks like, I can go when others, well, first of all, excuse me, exception, when others then don't do anything. Now, this is going to be incredibly misleading, but it should blow up. But notice it doesn't look like it's blowing up anymore. It doesn't look like it's blowing up anymore because this caused an explosion. It goes running into the exception section and doesn't do anything, right? So there's where that's going on. So if I wanted to basically control what it's actually doing, I would maybe say something like, maybe pick another number. That little beep beeps you're hearing in the background are my kids coming home. And here's an error message. I'm going to go default. All right. And we go run it. And now notice that, yeah, right there. There's my error, 20,001, default, line 13. Awesome. So I know you're thinking, Grant, we're causing an explosion here. We capture it, then we run it here and explode again. It'll make sense in just a couple minutes. What I want to do is I would like, instead of an explosion to happen right here in my executable section, I want to control this. I want, when there's a problem here, I want it to run out into the exception section and explode there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself an exception. Typically prefix is with an E, and I'll basically say time block. What is that? It's an exception. This is one of the more exotic data types. Then I can basically say, if there's a problem, please raise E time block. All right. And then down here in the exception section, I can go when there's an E time blocked. Okay. Then what I want you to do is we'll do this raise application error again. We'll use the error code from up here. We'll use the error message from up here. Yeah, and what I'll actually do is I'll say I'll add something unique, like a time, for example, and I'll just basically say, actually, well, not so much at. Let's be a little bit smarter than this. So rather than you wound me, this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to basically say you cannot do this between this thing, not the, sorry, the earliest hour and the latest hour. All right, so we'll put that in there instead, just like that. Let's see what's going on. When times I should put a then there. That's what it's trying to tell me there. All right, so when I clear this and we run it again, it's saying right there, you cannot do this between 2 and 3. And with a little bit of imagination, you can probably do something more intelligent there, but I'm just trying to show the exception section. All right, so we got ourselves a pretty decent program that looks reasonably good. All right, so now the next step in our little journey, I believe, is what we're going to do is make this into an actual trigger, because the whole reason we're doing this is so that we can stop someone from manipulating the basic table table. All right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to convert this thing to a trigger. Right now, it's just a script. It's just a block that runs out of this session. I'm going to actually create it so that it's stored on the database. So if I go create or replace trigger, and for now, I'm just going to go, I'm going to anticipate what I'm actually going to use it for. Basic table key as, well, sorry, not as. So with the trigger, you need to basically remember, this is a piece of code. This piece of code will fire off on an event in the database. That's what I'll do. And you know what? I just realized I'm actually still one step behind where I wanted to be here. We're not, before we create a trigger, we actually want to create a procedure. So I'm going to create a procedure first, because what I want to do is I don't want to have a bunch of code in my trigger. So what I want to do is I want to create a procedure, a program that lives on the database, and then I want my trigger to call that program. So I'm going to create a procedure, which is going to be basically block DML. All right, so block DML, and it's going to be as. This will work pretty smoothly, I think, if I compile it. So now it takes a little bit longer because it didn't actually run the script so much as create a block. And over here in my procedures, what we'll see is it now exists right there. So it's now a piece of code that exists right there. And if I run it with a straight begin, and now what I could do is I could take this block DML and I could go end. Right, this little doodad here, when I run it, it blows up, right? Notice it's blowing up. The block DML is blowing up, and I still have my error message. Awesome. All right, so we got this little block DML. What I want to do now is I want to basically say that I want to pass in the earliest hour. That's what I want to control this thing by passing in the earliest hour. So I'm going to add a parameter section here, which I'm going to have basically input earliest hour, and it's going to be a number. And I'm going to actually default it to 02. Right, you can have lots of parameters in here, and you know what? You should probably know this too. There are different ways the parameters can be dealt, can be used here. In this case, what I'm saying is that this value is, I'm saying basically a number is coming in. It's going to become that variable. And right now, if no one says anything, it's going to be 2. Now at this point, this guy is going to go away because I'm controlling that through a parameter. I'm going to still control the idea. I'm going to leave this alone. The latest, I'm just going to let it increment by 1. Except it's not going to be earliest hour, it's going to be I earliest hour, the parameter. And then down here, I'm blocking it between I earliest hour. All right, so let's run that guy. And I have a nice little error. Good deal. Okay, good, 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 good. This is a good time for me to demonstrate something else while I'm at it. All right, so when I said that this procedure was created, that the code was stored on the database, a couple of things I want you to note. First of all, note that this thing didn't compile cleanly. It's still stored on the database, and in fact, it's flagged it with an error. That's okay. The source code in this in the data dictionary is going to be sitting in user source, right? User source. So there is actually the source code. The error is going to be in a table called user errors. There's the actual error. And just so, because I forgot to bring it up earlier, this thing itself does exist in user objects right there, but do note that it is invalid, right? So I created something that just simply doesn't work. Just so you know, you can do that. So now here's the deal. If I look a little bit more at the error message, it's saying earliest hour must be declared. It's complaining about line 16. Here's line 16. And in fact, there's an earliest hour without the I. So I earliest hour. So when I compile this now, and I go, it's been compiled cleanly. So what's going to happen? Well, user source, all we're really going to see is that line 16 has got now the updated data. User errors is now blank, and user objects has got block DML, but it is now valid. So there you have it. And so now if I actually want to run that, I'm going to go begin and block DML, copy, excuse me, block DML, and I don't pass in anything. It's going to assume 2. And so we're going to get our explosion. If I pass in a number like 0 and run that block again, everything's cool, right? So basically, I'm controlling the parameter here. Oh, by the way, over here, if I refresh this, we'll see that he's back to being happy again. Okay, so one other thing I really should tell you is that this one, when I put the 0 in there, that's called a positional passing in. Like 0 gets thrown into the first parameter. A named passing would be that. This is where I'm basically saying that in block DML, I would like that parameter to be 0, right? That's a named passing, right? And just so you can see it, if I pass in 2, it's going to explode. All right. And a lot of times you might be thinking, well, how do you know what the parameters are? There are definitely ways to figure out what the parameters are. I've been trying not to give you too Oracle specific, but at the same time, we're deep in Oracle land right now. But even if you just ran this, you'd see that that's telling me right there that I've got a parameter called I earliest hour. It's a number and it's coming in. Okay, cool beans. So now we got ourselves, this is actually a procedure I would then want to use for a trigger. So I'm going to keep this procedure over here, and I'm going to start creating a trigger in another workspace. So let's do that and move this guy over. All right, worksheet, I should say. All right, so that's my block DML. So triggers. Triggers are pieces of code attached to events in the database. So they start their life by you going create or replace trigger. Then you want to give it a name. And then sometimes people name it after the table as well. And sometimes they suffix it with a T. Now I need to know the event. This one I'm going to be firing off before, we'll just say before an insert on the table basic table. Okay, and what are we going to do? We're going to go begin. And I'm going to, where are you? Basically, I'm doing this block right there. Now, when I run this, it created it. It's awesome. This guy is its own object. If I go up to user objects and have a look, we'll see that now we actually have a trigger, and that trigger is valid. While I'm here, I may as well just say, well, what happens if you make a mistake, Grant? What if you have 2 semicolons? That's totally possible. You can still compile the darn thing. It's going to give you an error. All right, there's my error. I'm going to go and say, hey, what's up? This guy's now invalid. I cannot remember, probably going to blow it here. Are the errors? Yep, the error is actually showing up in the user errors. However, you will not find it in the code in user source. The code for this, for triggers, is in user triggers because the developers hate you. So with functions, procedures, and packages, all that code is sitting in source. Right now, we've only talked about procedures. You weren't sleeping. We haven't talked about the other ones yet, and we might not for a bit. But triggers only exist in user triggers. All right. So anyway, and it's quite different, and it makes sense. It's quite different, to be honest, because triggers, remember, like things like their statement level, the firing before it's on an insert, it's on this table, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here, so I can understand why they made that decision. All right, so now user, did I fix it? Did I fix that problem? I didn't fix it, so let's fix it. We go, and there he is. The trigger is now in place. It is a program ready to fire off on the event. By the way, it is now sitting here as well. All right, so let's make ourselves an event. Let's make ourselves an event. So this is going to fire off on an insert, right? So if I go way back here and I try to insert, so I'm going to try and insert 1 into this table. We're going to go. Notice it gets blocked right away. Yeah, there's my error. You cannot do this between 2 and 3. So it goes rushing to the table. The program fires up, says, well, actually, let's bring it up. Program fires up, says, what time is it? And then basically says, if you're between this time, blow up. And so that's what you're seeing there. It basically went off and it blew up, which is pretty cool. All right. So yeah, okay. So it just did that. That's awesome. Okay, good. Okay, so that was actually a pretty good demonstration, I guess, of the trigger itself. I'm controlling this inside the trigger here, but if later we decided that maybe 2 o'clock wasn't right, we should have it only blow up from midnight to 1 or whatever. And then if I do the insert, now watch what's going to happen. Now what's going on is violating the primary key, right? So you're seeing a bunch of different things trying to protect your data. Let's go back, by the way. Let's go back to the example where this was 2, and we're almost done. Going to recompile it, clear, try and run it. Right, the trigger is the thing that's stopping it. That's awesome. This is before the insert. If I change this to after the insert, which is another option. So now the timing is set for after the insert. Watch what my error becomes as I try to put 1 in there. So what happens is that the insert hits the table, it violates the primary key, and that causes the explosion, and then this trigger is never actually called upon. So that's some kind of neat stuff there. Now, typically, if you're trying to deny somebody from doing anything, you'd want to basically deny it before the event happened. All right, so I'm changing that back to before. All right, a couple other minor things. You can disable and enable triggers. So alter table, alter table. That's right. Alter table, basic table, disable, and I think I just give it the name. Okay, so I'm going to go disable. Oh no, I think I got to say disable trigger. Yeah. All right, there's a good chance that's not going to work, but before I even test that out, let me just check out my user objects. Those user objects. So far everybody's enabled. Now if I go back here and I try to disable it, you're mad at me for some reason. You're mad at me, missing keyword, you're mad at me. Why are you mad at me? You're mad at me because Well, I tell you what, I'm going to take out that trigger just for giggles. See, now you're mad at me there too. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to pause this for a second so I can give myself a sanity check here. And as I said, it is late. So here's the deal. It's not alter table, it's alter trigger. And then it's going to be basically disable, and then the name of the thing that you're trying to disable. That's what I think anyway. Oh, it's still wrong. All right. 1 second. Yep. For those of you that saw me do this in class, I actually did it relatively smoothly, but you know what? It's okay. There you go. It's now disabled. If we were to go and have a look at the object, we'll see that this guy is now, it's valid, but somewhere out here, I thought I would, oh, you know what? It's going to be user triggers. User triggers will tell me whether this thing is disabled or not. Triggers. And here, so there he is. There, he's disabled. All right, so that basically means I could do an insert without a problem. I'll tell you what, let me just do an insert right now. So insert, we'll insert 4, so there's no worry about the constraint. So we insert 4, no problem. Now if I enable this, and then try and insert 5, I can't because of the block. And that's more or less everything you need to know for the temporal trigger.